Hey guys, this is Gustex. So there are so many attachments in this game, and if you actually count them, you're looking at anywhere from 25 up to 80 attachments on some weapons. And that is actually a ridiculous high number. So when it comes down to choosing the right attachments, the decision is not easy at all, obviously, right? It depends on the gun you're using, the game mode that you're playing, and even the situation you're in at that exact moment and how you play it. In this video today, I'm going to show you the best attachments that you absolutely need to know about. I'm not going to cover every single attachment though, because honestly, some categories just don't matter. However, if you want a full attachments breakdown, I already made a video on that and I'll leave the link in the description for you. And without further ado, let's get started. The first category that I want to talk about is actually muzzles. So the two most important ones I want to mention are the compensated brake and the long suppressor. The compensated brake is actually the best muzzle attachments for recoil control, believe it or not. But of course, it does not hide your firing, okay? So if you're someone who doesn't really care about getting spotted here and there, the compensated brake is actually the way to go. It makes the gun feels pretty strong and very like on target. It gives you that good feeling about the, the firing. Not all weapons will have this option though, so keep that in mind, okay? The second one is the long suppressor, all right? Out of all the suppressors, this one is actually my favorite. Now, the difference between the long suppressor and the lightning suppressor is very minimal, to the point that sometimes you can't even tell which one you're using. If there is any difference, it would be in terms of the bloom control. Bloom is slightly better controlled with the lightning suppressor, but that's only noticeable at really long ranges, okay? I'm talking about 75 meters and beyond. At least that's how I experienced it. And because the lightning suppressor are a little bit, more expensive in terms of the points than the long, suppressor, then the long one should be your, go-to muzzle in most cases. And of course, we know suppressors in general will reduce your recoil and improve your recoil recovery. You do, however, lose a little bit of that hipfire accuracy and gain some, weapon sway with the long suppressor. But honestly, the weapon sway barely matters. You won't even feel it. And before I mention anything about barrels, I want you to understand what bullet velocity or projectile velocity actually is. So bullet velocity basically means how fast your bullets hit the target. The faster the bullet, the less it's affected by gravity. That means faster hit registration. That means your shots reach the target sooner. And when enemies are strafing or sprinting, higher bullet velocity reduces how far ahead you need to lead your shot, and it will get less bullet drop overall. But this also doesn't mean more damage, it doesn't lower TTK, and it does not reduce recoil. Velocity only affects how fast the bullet travels, not how hard it hits. So in the barrel category, there are two barrels that you really need to understand. The first one is the extended and the second one is the heavy extended. If I have both options available on a gun, I personally go with the heavy extended every time. And if you compare both of them to the standard barrel, both of them actually have higher or increased bullet velocity. And the difference comes down to the ADS speed and bloom only. The extended barrel gives you faster ADS, so quicker aiming, and the heavy extended, because it's heavier, gives you slower ADS, but better bloom control. So yes, you can say the extended is snappier, but the heavy extended has better bloom control. And for me, that puts it at number 1. Heavy extended is the pick, no brainer. Now, moving on to the grips, there are actually 3 categories and I want to explain the difference between them, okay? The categories are the verticals, the stubbies, and the angled grips. And the difference between them is actually the aiming speed. Vertical grips have the slowest aiming speed, stubbies have faster aiming speed, and the fastest are actually the angled grips. I won't talk much about the bipods or pods in general because honestly, they're just not worth using in my opinion. Now, my top 3 grips are actually the classic vertical, the low profile stubby, and the full angled. I do switch between the classic vertical and the full angled grip pretty often here and there. Within the same category, the lower you go on the list, for example, if you go from the classic vertical down to the 6H64 and then to the ribbed, to the alloy, or the folding, the less recoil control you get. On the flip side, your mobility improves as you go down the list. So for vertical grips, the classic vertical gives you the best recoil control, hands down. I usually choose the classic vertical for more stable firefights, especially like at mid and long ranges and when I'm not constantly fighting in close quarters. But when I'm on a map or in a situation where it's mostly close quarters and short range fights, I go with the full angled grip. It gives you that best ADS speed and it still offers a decent amount of recoil control, of course, in comparison to the verticals. Now let's talk about mags, okay? Basically, you've got regular mags and fast mags. That's in general. The obvious difference is reload speed, but honestly, the difference is very small. You really only notice it when you completely empty the mag and the gun auto reloads itself after the last bullet. But if you reload manually before hitting 0, which is what you'll probably do in most of the time, the difference between fast mag and regular mag is barely noticeable. And that's my observation, and I think you should know about it too. So in my opinion, fast mags don't meaningfully affect gameplay. Choosing a fast mag and spending points on it, it's kind of like irrelevant and just not worth it. Mag size, on the contrary, it's actually what matters. Smaller mags are lighter, and lighter mags gives you faster ADS and faster aiming. So if you can play with like a 20 round mag, you'll probably notice better gameplay compared to like a 30 or 40 round mag, simply because you're aiming on target faster. Now, of course, this depends on your playstyle and whether you're like in close quarters fights or longer range engagements, but it's something you should definitely take into consideration. So prioritize mag size, not regular versus fast. Okay, let's talk about ammunition next, okay? Basically, every gun comes with a standard option, which is the FMJ. This is a standard penetration ammo, the default choice, and honestly, to go for in almost everything. It's reliable, consistent, and has no real downside. It actually has better recoil control than some other types of ammo. So you might as well keep this as your default most of the time. Now, the lightweight or the polymer case ammo gives you faster ADS. Sometimes I do go with this one, and it's a solid second option or second choice if you have the points for it, which is only 5 extra points. The Tungsten trades recoil for better penetration, okay? So this can cause damage to soldiers behind the initial target you're shooting. So yes, it's very situational. In most firefights, targets behind the first enemy are slightly off to the side and don't get hit anyway. And if you're like fighting more than one player at the same time, Tungsten becomes pretty much irrelevant and could be actually harmful because of that increased recoil. So I do consider it as like situational benefit, okay? Another situational option is the hollow point ammo. This one is only really useful if your aim is consistently high. If you're not always aiming in the upper chest or the head level, you'll probably get very little value out of it, okay? So the whole point of hollow point is improved headshot damage. And basically, at the end of the day, the best two options in this category are the default FMJ and the polymer case ammo. Now, I want you to understand a few things about lasers, okay? All lasers are visible to the enemy except for the red one, and that visibility actually matters. So if an enemy has a laser on, you can see it, especially if you're like holding a corner and they're coming into the room or pushing through a hallway from like a doorway. Lasers travel in a straight line, so they give you a way basically. Now, yes, there is a way around that. You can turn the laser off while you're like running to a position and then turn it back on when you're like close to the enemy and ready to shoot. But let's be real, that takes time and effort, and nope, you're not doing that, okay? So forget about it. Your best bet is the red laser. This one increases your hipfire accuracy and you can actually see it in real time. Look at that, crosshair gets a little tighter on the screen. The other one I wanted to mention is actually the 50 MW blue laser. This one doesn't just improve your hipfire accuracy, it also increases your ADS speed, which can actually make a real difference. Just keep in mind the ADS accuracy benefit mostly applied when you're moving. So I don't know if it's going to be really beneficial to you, especially with knowing how much it will cost from your points. And that's pretty much it, guys. This was just a quick rundown of the most important attachments that you must and absolutely know in the game. You will use these attachments on daily basis, or I should say every time you play. And again, if you want a rundown of all attachments, refer to that video that I made a few weeks ago. However, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because we appreciate all support from you guys, and stay tuned for the next one, alright? Now cheers and have a good day.